All right, y'all. It is 1:05. There's still some folks that are joining late, so I'm going to be admitting everyone as they join, but I'm going to go ahead and get started with our current session right now. So this session's topic is going to be on Robert's Rules of Order. For those of you that don't know me or just joining now, my name is Holly Mays. I work for the Department of Associated Students as the Assistant Director of Governmental Affairs. And I work as one of the advisors to the Senate, which is my relationship to Robert's Rules of Order. But I'm hoping that today's session will give you some structure and some tips to be able to implement in your meetings, and for the senators that have joined us today, will hopefully increase some of your confidence at the Senate table. And before I go ahead and get started on the content, I wanted to pass it over to your Internal Vice President, B. Schaefer.
Hello, everyone. The following statement I would like to read is the statement that I've read for each training. So to a lot of you, it might be, the same few words, but I wanted to say on behalf of the AS President, EVPLA, and Student Advocate General, we would like you to look at this content and participate actively. This content reflects stuff that we find essential to the association for the 2021-2022 academic school year. Please note that this training is not the complete portion of the information you will be required to learn. However, it is a start that will help prepare you for the school year. Thank you so much. That's all. I'll hand it back to Holly.
Awesome. Thanks so much, B. Okay, so my apologies, my camera is not working. I have a very old laptop, but I am here and I appreciate your participation and engagement and your time today. And so hopefully me not having my camera on will help the both of us see all of the content easier. Just going to make the most of it. So the structure for today's sessions, or today's session rather, is I'm going to go over an overview of what is parliamentary procedure, and then I'm going to walk through the standard procedure, through objections, through amendments, and then points. And I'll have some breaks in between where we can practice the different skills that we learn. Plugged in my headphones also, so we can practice the different skills that we learned, and so I can take any questions as we go along. B, I see your hand is raised again. Was that left over, or did you want to jump in?
That's left over. My apologies.
Okay. No worries. Yeah, so as I'm going through the content today, please don't be afraid to ask any questions. You can unmute yourself, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you, you can add things in the chat. Don't be shy, feel free to jump in at any point. It's not going to bother me at all. But let's go ahead and get started. Also, I'm sorry if the Prezi is like kind of annoying as the slide bounces through. I'm going to try to reduce that as much as I can with reduced clicking. Okay, so what is parliamentary procedure? And so you may hear the terms parliamentary procedure or Robert's Rules of Order used interchangeably. And the reason for that is that Robert's Rules of Order is a type of parliamentary procedure. So you can think of parliamentary procedure as a way that meetings are conducted. So essentially what this structure, these rules allow for in meetings is business to be handled in an organized and logical fashion. So this means that we're reducing the amount of interruptions, right? Everybody has a chance to speak. We have an agenda that we move through, so everybody knows what topics we're discussing. And it allows for just speaking agreements in general, like who speaks when and in what order, It allows for that to be really organized. This is also really helpful for minute takers as well. In all of our AS entities, as well as Senate, particularly for Senate, of course, because they are responsible for financial expenditures and for the passage of legislation, but all of our entities are required to take minutes. And this is also really helpful for your minute takers, because I don't know if you've ever tried to take notes in a meeting where there are multiple folks trying to speak over the top of each other. It can be really challenging to jot down who said what and when. And in particular, when we are recording business actions like spending money, just allocating resources in general, it's really important that we have that documented clearly. And so having some kind of structure to our meetings really helps with that process. Also, Robert's Rules of Order allows for what is referred to as majority rule, which this essentially means that there is a vote taken for actions that are passed, like motions. And so this means essentially that everybody gets input and an opinion, but that ultimately the majority vote is what is considered to be passing. It also does allow for the rights of the minority, as it's referred to be protected. So if you are a dissenter, if you have a dissenting opinion, everybody has the same opportunity to speak and to vote. So it allows for all of that to take place. And then it also allows, like I said at the beginning, for a formal sense of order to be established. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move into the standard procedure. Let's see if it'll let me go a little closer on this here. So we're going to start with the very beginning, which is open floor or discussion. So this looks a little bit different, but pretty similar in entity meetings as well as Senate. So every meeting is going to start off with an open floor. So this looks like your chair calls the meeting to order. You go through roll call, or maybe roll call is silent, but when you're getting ready to start the meeting, your chair might say something like, "The floor is now open." So this means that you as a member or a senator can make what's called a motion. So that would be, I motion to pass this piece of legislation. I motion to approve this expenditure. Really anything that you're wanting to formally approve or pass, right? Like we motion to approve the use of Corwin for our assembly, or something like that. That's what a motion could look like. And then for every motion, there needs to be a second. This is a part of the consensus building that takes place in our meetings and in Robert's Rules of Order. So this is a part of that support for majority rule and minority rights, is that there has to be other folks that want to see the motion move forward. And what that looks like is the second, right? So if just one person is motioning to spend the money, and there is no second, that motion is going to die, because essentially what happens is there's no committee support for moving it forward. So that kind of ends that where it is. So then after a second, then you're going to go into discussion on the motion. That is going to be the place for like literally any discussion, any comments. This could be a time where you make a comment in support of a bill. This is where you can ask clarifying questions of the author. If you've already discussed like an expenditure or some other topic. You may not have a lot of discussion items once you get to this point. And that's totally fine. This is an opportunity essentially to discuss, like, as a committee, if you're going to vote yes or no, like, you can use that opportunity to reach consensus if need be. But if there's other discussion prior that may not be necessary, or if it's something that there's unilateral support for, it may not be needed either. And then after discussion, or essentially to end discussion, somebody on the committee or the Senate will do what's called call the question. This is essentially asking the group to, what they refer to it as calling the question, right? So it's, I motion to pass X, Y, and Z. I motion to pass the resolution. Calling the question is asking the committee to answer yes or no, is kind of how it works. So you will hear your committee members say, call the question. Your chair will say, a question has been called. Is there an objection to call the question? You all will say consent, and then the motion passes. And when the motion passes, that could look like the expenditures pass, the bill and resolution passes, whatever direction that motion was taking is what passes. That's the official thing that happens. Okay, so I'm going to back this up just a little bit and review it from this angle. So the floor is going to be open. I motion to pass this resolution. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator whoever. We're now in discussion. There's a call to question. A question has been called. Is there an objection to call to question? And we're assuming that it, for this example's purpose, that we have consent, and then the motion passes. So I want to pause here and ask if that makes sense to everyone, or if there are any questions, or if anybody wants to add anything before we move on to objections. Okay. Not seeing any questions. See, thumbs up. Thank you. If this makes sense to anybody else, can you thumbs up also? Okay. I know the Robert's Rules of Order can be complicated, so I hope that the way that I explain it is helpful. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay. Because don't let me go on the wrong track, y'all. If it doesn't make sense, stop me. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about objections. The first objection that I want to cover, there are two, is the first one is objection to consent. So if you remember, as we're going through the standard procedure, and we get to the point where there's been a call to question, right? Your chair is going to ask, is there an objection to call to question? And actually, let me start there first. Okay. Since that is more in line with the order. Okay. So your chair is going to ask, is there an objection to call to question? So what this objection means is that you are objecting to a vote being taken, because that's what the call to question is, right? It's asking the committee, asking the Senate, the group, to consider the motion, to take a vote on the motion. And so an objection to call the question is saying, no, I don't want a vote to be taken. And this can happen for a variety of reasons. Maybe the person that made the motion said, like, the number for the expenditure incorrectly, or there is another reason why you don't want a vote to be taken. You disagree with the motion, whatever the reasoning may be. This objection to call the question is saying, I don't want a vote to be taken. So I know that there's a lot of arrows in here, but we're going to walk through it together. So you can see in the top middle here, Once there has been an objection to call the question, your chair will ask the person who called the question, uh, do you withdraw your call to question? So this gives the opportunity for the person to say yes or no. If they choose to withdraw, you go back into discussion. That's what this green arrow and the two left squares on the right of this are. You withdraw your call to question, you go back into discussion on the motion. If the person who calls to question disagrees and there is no withdrawal on the call to question, you will see we go to the red arrow on the left. So how this is resolved, right? Because we now have a conflict. There's a person who doesn't want the committee to take a vote on the motion, and there is a person who does, right? The person that called to question. So the tool that we utilize to resolve that is called a vote to vote. And this can also happen in the other objection to consent. But for this purpose, a vote to vote is essentially saying we're all going to decide collectively as a committee, as a Senate, as a group, are we going to be taking a vote on this motion? So that's where the vote to vote comes in. And so you cannot abstain from this vote, just as an addition. And if the vote to vote fails, that means that the committee decided collectively through this vote that they want to go back into discussion on the motion. If the committee decides collectively that they would like to take a vote, then the vote to vote passes, right? We all have decided we're gonna move forward and take a vote, or if it fails, we've all decided, nope, we're gonna go back into discussion. So if the vote to vote passes, you're then gonna go into what's called a hand vote. And so this is helpful for a few reasons. Namely, one of the important reasons is that, again, referring back to minute taking, your minute taker records the amount of yes, no, and abstention votes in your minutes. And so when we have objections like these, your minute taker has to record what is happening, like what were the steps that you all took to reach this vote, this passage, and an allowance of this expenditure, right? And if you have people that are voting yes, you have people that are voting no, in a vote to vote or a regular vote, counting, like literally counting the amount of people that vote yes, the amount of people that vote no, and the amount of people that abstain, allows your minute taker to record those votes. Another reason along that line too is once we have the votes counted, then your chair can determine, are there enough yes votes for this motion to pass? Are there more no votes? And so the motion dies. Your chair needs to determine all of that before moving forward. So being able to literally count the votes is really helpful in that case. Okay, so going through the objection to call the question one more time, your chair is going to ask, do you withdraw? If the person that called the question says yes, you go back into discussion. If they say no, then you go to a vote to vote and then a hand vote if the vote to vote passes. And if the vote to vote fails, you're going to go back into discussion on the motion. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, I see a couple thumbs up. Awesome. Like I said, if this doesn't make sense, please ask questions so that we can talk through it together.
Yeah, I'm just confused on like the difference between no withdrawal of call to question and the withdrawal of call to question. Like when you withdraw your call to question, are you essentially saying I no longer question what's being motioned? Is that what's going on?
Kind of. So if you withdraw That's essentially saying either you agree with the person that objected, but essentially what happens is that you are removing your ask of the committee to take a vote on this motion. Because that's essentially what the call to question is it's asking like, hey, everybody, let's take a vote on this motion. And when you withdraw, it's a bit more formal, but it's kind of like a never mind. So that's essentially what it is that you agree with the objection, or maybe you want to hear what the person has to say. Like oftentimes after the objection, somebody just had a clarifying question, or they have an amendment or something else. And sometimes folks want to move forward. So the withdrawal is saying, like, yes, I can agree, let's move back into discussion. And once you're back into discussion, somebody can call to question again. It doesn't like end the motion entirely. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the next type of objection that I want to cover is this objection to consent. So you can consider this to be your no vote, right? So different from the objection to call to question. When we're going through the standard procedure, we have somebody calls to question, your chair will say, is there an objection to call to question? Nobody objects, it's silent. And generally folks will then take that opportunity to say consent or object as their vote casting, right? So when you hear people say like, is there an objection to call to question, and then you see people say consent, or you hear rather, your objection to consent is that no vote, right? Because you're objecting to the motion passing. And that's what consent means in this case, is consenting to the motion moving forward. And so this can sometimes be confusing, as you can imagine, with the objection to call to question phrase being really like close by. So sometimes you may hear your chair, or you as a chair may ask, are you objecting to call the question, or are you objecting to consent? That'll help folks figure out what objection is taking place. But if you want to vote no on a resolution, on an expenditure, on any motion, if you want to vote no on a motion for a variety of reasons, you will go into a hand vote. So if you remember me just a couple of minutes ago talking about how hand votes are important so that we can count physically the number of people that are saying yes and no, that's exactly the same reasoning for this objection to consent, right? Because all of our, for senators, there's another layer, because different bills and resolutions have different passing threshold. Some of them are 50% plus one, some are 2/3, some are 3/4. And entities as well also have thresholds for passing their motions as well, generally 50% plus one. But being able to literally count the amount of people that say yes or no is helpful, again, so that your chair can determine, did this motion actually pass, so that you can determine if you've met that threshold, right? We don't want to expend funds for something that wasn't approved. And so that's what an objection to consent is. Does that make sense? That one's pretty simple otherwise. Okay. So now I'm going to move into amendments. If there's no comments or questions about objections. Okay. So amendments, again, there's a couple of arrows here as well. We're going to walk through it together. So how a motion is amended, right? So if you're in discussion and you realize, dang it, I said that it should have been $100 when it should have been 1,000. Like, can we just change it in the minutes? Can we just go back and backspace? The answer to that is no, but we do have a process through Robert's Rules of Order to do that. If you realize that you found yourself in a pickle, so to speak, with misspeaking, or maybe as the discussion develops, there are things in the motion that you're wanting to amend. So this is the process, motioning to amend. So you can see here at the very top, there is that sample language, right? I motion to amend the motion to, a little wordy, but it makes it clear that you're motioning to amend, so that you're asking your colleagues on the Senate floor and your committee to agree to the amendment, right? Every decision that is made is through a vote, and an amendment is no different. And so let me zoom in here a little bit so you can read that. So the square right below that says, the chair asks the one who made the original motion if the amendment is okay with them. You can use the phrase, is the amendment friendly with the first? The first refers to the person that made the motion, as opposed to the second, the person who seconded the motion. So you can see here on the left, if the person, or the right, I'm sorry, on the right, if the person who made the motion, the first, agrees with the amendment, then that is considered to be friendly with the first, and the amendment becomes the new motion. So if in my original example, you accidentally motioned for $100 when it should have been 1,000, you motion to amend the motion to say $1,000. The chair will ask, is it friendly with the first? They will say yes, and the amendment becomes the new motion. On the left-hand side is what it looks like if the person that made the motion says no, that it's not friendly with them. And they can decide this however, with whatever reasoning, many reasons you could decide this. And if it's unfriendly, your chair is going to ask for additional consensus, additional committee support, in the form of asking, is there a second for the amendment? So this allows your chair to determine, is there other committee support for this amendment, or is there not, right? Everything is based around majority rule and reaching consensus together. So if there is a second, you can see that green arrow there going to the right. If there is a second, you will then go into discussion on the amendment and you will vote on it the same way that you do another motion. So you can see here it says call the question and then vote on the amendment. So you will go through discussion and calling to question like you do with any other motion. And if it passes, you vote on it and it passes, then the amendment becomes a new motion. That's that third green arrow here down at the bottom, moving up. And so if the motion is not friendly with the first and there is no second, the amendment dies and you go back into discussion on the original motion. The amendment fails. This is essentially because the chair has determined that there is no consensus, no additional support, so to speak, for supporting this amendment. So you will go back into discussion on the original motion as it is. Does that make sense to everybody? Are there any questions about amendments? Okay, see a couple thumbs up. Thanks. Okay. All right, so we've got about maybe like 8-9 minutes left until our next scheduled break. So what I actually want to offer is for us to practice the standard procedure. And so for those of you that are willing and able to participate, maybe I could ask you, B, if you want to chair our mini practice rounds. I want to see if we can go through this standard procedure a couple of times, or if it would be more helpful, we can do breakout rooms for a couple of minutes and you can run through it together. Does that sound okay to everyone? Okay. So, so we've got a vote for here. That sounds good to me. Okay, let's run through it a couple of times here. And so I'm going to ask you all, whenever you go to speak, to just unmute yourselves and jump in, or raise your hand and I can call on you if that's something that you prefer. B, did you want to go ahead and lead this activity, or would you like me to?
I don't know how many rounds we're doing. You can lead the first round and like I can do the second, but something just popped up. As always, at an opportune time, something has to pop up. Someone emails me. So you do this round and then like I'll circle back. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, so the floor is now open and I'm going to invite you all to begin by sharing a motion. Just make something up that is applicable and appropriate. It can be like free pizza on Fridays or something. It can be whatever you want it to be.
I motion to pass the resolution or the bill to allot funding for free pizza on Fridays.
All right, there's a motion to pass the resolution allotting funding for free pizza on Fridays. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
There's a second. We are now in discussion.
Call question.
Question has been called. Is there an objection to call to question?
Consent.
Is there an objection to consent? Seeing none, motion passes. All right, y'all, thanks for participating. I'm going to run through this one more time so that we can all hear it together. Just want to make sure we're still good on time. And then we'll do a really quick, like 2-minute breakout room so that you can run through it again 1 or 2 more times with a smaller group. Okay, so I'm going to ask for folks that didn't participate this last time to maybe jump in this time. So the floor is now open. Do we need some ideas for motions? It can be to pass a resolution. We can motion to end tuition. What's something ridiculous or fun?
I motion to pass the resolution for Doja Cat to perform at Extrav.
You said it extra?
At Extravaganza.
Extravaganza. Okay. There's a motion to pass the resolution to bring Doja Cat to extravaganza. Is there a second?
I second.
There's a second. We're now in discussion.
Call to question.
Question has been called. Is there an objection to call the question?
Objection.
Are you objecting to call the question or objecting to consent?
Objection to call to question.
Okay. I didn't see who called the question. Can you raise your hand or unmute yourself so I can hear you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Do you withdraw your call to question?
No.
Okay, we're now going to go into a vote to vote. Y'all are making this example very thorough. Okay. So for fun, if you vote yes, utilize the raise hand function. I'm not going to count it because there's 70 of you also. Raise your hand if you want to vote yes. Okay, we have 20 yeses. Zoom actually counts it for us. Okay, and if you would like to vote no on the vote to vote, I think there's a different reaction. You can do the red X. Let me see where I can find it. Yeah, do the red X if you want to vote no on our example vote to vote. Okay, there are 3 red X's. That means the vote to vote passes. So we're now going to go into a hand vote. So if everybody wants to clear their raised hands. So we're taking a hand vote now on the original motion, which is to bring Doja Cat to extravaganza. If you would like to vote yes in our example, please raise your hand. And if you would like to vote no, go ahead and do so the same way. Use the red X. Okay, looks like we have 23 yes votes and 3 no votes, which means the resolution to bring Doja Cat to extravaganza has passed. How did that feel? Okay, got some thumbs up. Okay. Does it make a little more sense hearing it spoken out loud versus me explaining through the process? Okay, seeing a few more thumbs up. Okay, we are just about at time, so I'm not going to put you all into breakout rooms. I'm just going to ask if anybody has any questions, any comments, anything that you want me to clarify.
Is there a place where we can find this process? Like on the AS website if we forget? Because it's kind of long, right?
Yeah, no, it is. It definitely is a practice for sure. So I'm
Mhm.
going to send you all a copy of this presentation, and then I also made like a little cheat sheet, I call it, which has some like common motions and how you would work through that. So like what it looks like to motion to take a recess or something. So I'll send that all to you, and then I'll connect with, I don't know if it's on our website off the top of my head, so I'll see if we can find a good place to plug it in. But for now, if you have any questions about it or want more information, you can reach out to me directly, but I will be sending you the presentation and the guide. Question, are there common loops that come up in practice discussion that we should remember? I would say that the most common issue that I hear of, and maybe you all can actually share with me some of the pain points that you have, is just folks kind of like losing their spot and like not knowing what steps to go in. So I hear often questions about like, wait, where are we again? And it's different, of course, for senators and maybe entities, just because the group dynamics can be different and people can be at different skill levels. The senators that come in may or may not know Robert's Rules of Order, just as an entity member may or may not know as well. So yeah, those are some of the common questions that I hear. But are there any like pain points in particular for anybody that they want to share, or something that they are keeping in mind? And if everybody, I see lots of raised hands still, I'm sure that they're left over from our activity. So if you are not wanting to answer, as I imagine, if you want to lower your hand. Or if you want to answer, you can go ahead and do that. Okay. I'm not hearing anything, and I know we've gone a couple of minutes over. So thank you so much for your time and your engagement today. We're going to take another quick break. We'll be back at 2 p.m. To hear from Adrian and the Education Abroad program. Sorry, go ahead, B.
I wanted to say something, but I can't find my document. So I wanted to ask if people could hold like a minute while I look for it.
Sure.
Okay, please wait, everyone, 1 second.
Hi, Holly.
Yeah.
I have a question. How is the objection to consent different from the objection to call to question?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So an objection to call to question is an objection to the vote itself being cast. When you are calling to question, you're asking for the committee or the group to take a vote, and an objection to call to question is objecting to that vote being taken, that whole process. And an objection to consent is voting no on the motion itself, is that you want the motion to be voted on, but you don't agree with it, or you don't agree with the motion or the legislation or anything like that. So one is objecting to the vote itself being taken, which is the objection to call the question, and the other is objecting to what the vote is being held for, like the content itself.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Hello, can you all hear me? If anyone doesn't have any questions, I would like to speak, Holly.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see any questions.
Okay. Hello, everyone. As far as the Senate goes and you all attending Senate meetings and speaking, we strictly adhere by parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules of Order. And so I briefly just wanted to talk about kind of like how I will be handling things up to my interpretation. I want to let you all know that we now have a parliamentarian who is in charge of kind of making sure that we're following parliamentary procedure. And that parliamentarian is Surya Pagal, who is a former senator of the 71st Senate. So I will be emailing you all their information. Actually, I will have them email the entire association their email so that you can ask them questions about parliamentary procedure. I did have the opportunity for former senators to come speak. However, I don't see any in the audience. But I wanted to let you all know that when you are in the Senate meeting, just as BCU members or chairs leading a report or something, I apologize for my dog. If you notice that people are, senators are not, listening to what you're saying and or not observing Robert's Rules of Order, please notify me in your space. I don't know if your BCU will strictly adhere to Robert's Rules of Order. As a chair, you have the opportunity to, I believe in legal code, don't quote me, modify how you conduct your meetings. However, if you do not modify the way you conduct your meetings, if you're having issues with conducting your meeting and getting through Robert's Rules of Order, please reach out to myself and or Holly as a resource to facilitate your meeting conduct. That's all. The rest of the stuff that I had to speak about, I realize is for senators. It's Senate specific for as far as facial expressions, tone, problem areas that have been reported to me by BCU members. So I will be addressing that with them specifically. If any of you all have ever emailed me about, hey, the senator made this facial expression, or hey, I've noticed that senators' tones are offensive and it offends me in the audience, I will also be addressing that. So rest assured that that will be taken care of. And that's all. Thank you, Holly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, B. And thank you everyone again for your time. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and start that break I mentioned. So I'll see you all again in 8 minutes.